Now up on the Short Time Wrestling podcast, we're keeping it on with Final X, but a couple things that go along with Final X on June 10th at The Rock, the Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey. Sorry that the New Jersey Devils didn't get a chance to make it through the Stanley Cup playoffs again, although they've got good success, but we're going to find success in wrestling in this building. It's been there for the Garden State Grapple. Now it gets a chance, Dylan Wanagale and crew, to host Final X. As all 30 of our weight classes are going to be determined there, but behind the scenes, there's things that go on in wrestling to help make sure our athletes and our sport continues to have a future and grows. And today we're talking with the U.S. Wrestling Foundation, Jeff Waters, the chairman of the board, and Jack Clark, the executive director. And a lot of things tied with USA Wrestling, the NWCA. You guys at the USWF completely creating some synergy with our wrestling organizations for our athletes, for our fans and whatnot. And Jeff, we're going to start with you. And before we get into the nuts and bolts of what the USWF, in which some people may look at that acronym and be like, well, wait a minute. This isn't the 70s. We're not going through the alphabet wars again. But Jeff, you've been a part of this group from the get-go. And before we do that, the sport of wrestling, it brings you in. It sucks you in somehow. I don't know how it sucked me in. It was a dual meet in 1995. I've been in it ever since. What about you? How do you connect with the sport of wrestling?
Yeah, good morning, Jason, and thanks for having us on. We really appreciate it. So I guess my wrestling story, like so many people out there, is a family story. Uh, my brother Dave I'm from Farmingdale, New York, Section 8, Nassau County. My brother Dave, when he was a skinny middle school kid, decided to go out for the wrestling team. He wasn't very athletic, naturally athletic, but he willed himself to be a great wrestler. He ended up fourth in the NCAA tournament for Lehigh in 1969. Then my brother Eric came along. He was second in New York State and actually lost to Jack Spates, the longtime Oklahoma coach, in the state finals. And then I came along after that. I was a pretty good high school wrestler, two-time Nassau County place winner. And the key part of my story from there is that opened the door for me to go to Yale. My brother Eric went to Penn, so I kind of understood the Ivy League thing. And, it opened that door for me and subsequently took my life in a direction it wouldn't have gone otherwise. So I attribute a lot of the great things that have happened to me in my life directly to wrestling and what it did for me. Um, so
Jack, what about you? I know you've been, for some people may have seen your name a lot on the Facebook groups, a lot of I wrestled in this state, I wrestled in this state, I wrestled in this state, and we can talk more about that later on. But your foray into this great sport.
My dad told me in seventh grade that, Jack, you need to toughen up. So he sent me out to the wrestling team. He was a wrestler, uh, ended up wrestling junior high, high school, and college. And I'm, I guess, about as tough as I can get. But I got into the foundation because it's really something that all of our kids need, right? Particularly at this day and age. So it's about how do we strengthen our kids, help them overcome challenges, and live productive lives.
So as we talk about the U.S. Wrestling Foundation, Jeff, how's this thing start? Where's the genesis story of the USWF, at least the one that we know of today?
yeah. It's funny, by the way, as an aside, uh, and I'll get into this in a second. When Zeke Jones was the national team coach and he had a big meeting after the Olympics to kind of break everything down, and that's when we were first being introduced to people. I predicted to someone on the side, I said, as soon as people see USWF, there's going to be an uproar in the room. And I got up and I said, this is not the 1970s, guys, get over it. Because some guys have never gotten over that fight, over the Federation back in the 70s. But anyway, I mentioned my brother Eric wrestled at Penn. And after Yale dropped their program tragically in the early 90s, I basically became a Penn booster. Roger Reyna saw me that I was interested and kind of sucked me in. And I got to know the Penn guys. And then Zeke Jones took over from Roger. And I got to know Zeke, during the time he was a coach at Penn. And then he went out to Colorado Springs. And when Zeke got out there, he looked around and he said, hey, why don't we have a booster club for the men's freestyle team the way I had at Penn? Because the Penn Booster Club that Roger had gotten, going, they raised a lot of money. They gave the kids jobs and internships. They just provided a lot of resources. He said, we should do something like that. And he was talking to Larry Nugent one day, who used to be the development director for for USA Wrestling, and talking to him about this, and said, well, we need to recruit some guys. And I had just been on the phone with Larry talking to him about fundraising, and Larry said, oh, like there's this guy Jeff Waters, and Zeke was like, I know that guy. And I said, it's not like they did a scientific nationwide search and hired Heidrich and Struggles. I was like, oh, you know a guy, I know a guy, he's the guy. But it wasn't just me. There were actually 6 of us: Kevin Hummer from Missouri, and Jim Pearson from Indiana. And then he had Tommy Rowlands and Andy Rovat. We had a little group, and we started working on the Friends of Freestyle. And then Rich Bender came in and said, listen, it's tough for us to have only a group for one style when we've got 3 styles. And he had already been thinking about having an independent foundation. Some of the other national governing bodies have them. Skiing has a really big one, swimming, and others have them. So this was already on his mind. He saw there was a group kind of organized and forming. So I went from being the informal leader of a group of people starting a booster club to him pointing his finger at me and saying, we're going to do a foundation and you're in charge and you're going to start it. So it wasn't what I thought I was signing up for, but to me, it was like a call to service. Like I said, it attributes so much of the great things that happened in my life to wrestling. When the head Olympic coach and the head of the national governing body ask you to serve, no matter how busy your life is otherwise, there's only one possible answer to that. So that's how the foundation started. It was December of 2012, 6 weeks before, the bomb dropped about wrestling being dropped from the Olympics.
Yeah, and it's how so many wrestling or groups are founded. You sit there, you might be having dinner or you're a tournament between sessions at a Buffalo Wild Wings or something in Fargo, and an idea pops up, and next thing you know, that's the committee.
Yeah.
But a little bit more in that. Jack, when did you start to enter the fray with the Wrestling Foundation?
Shortly after that, might have been 2014 was my first year. I started off part-time and just worked our way through to figure out what are the issues that we're trying to solve. And we really got to the point of, how do we act and serve at a 30,000 foot level to help grow the sport for everyone at all levels.
Now, as we move into what our purpose of the foundation is, we've had 3 players that have worked really closely together, ever since I really got into covering wrestling nationally. At first, I remember first time I ever heard of something with USA Wrestling, the NWCA, and the National Wrestling Hall of Fame was what was called the Amateur Wrestling Alliance or something along those lines. I want to say, right, I think it started with the launch of the mat.com when USA Wrestling purchased it from Joe LaRue, the domain, and it became the tagline, the ultimate source for real wrestling. And so, I mean, as far as that purpose of the early organizational structure, those groups know how to work together. They've worked together on various initiatives over the years. But where does the U.S. Wrestling Foundation come in with this, Jeff, in bringing those organizations together again for another cause?
Right. So, as I was just saying, it started with USA Wrestling. But from the very beginning, I think it was understood and agreed that we would not just be a direct adjunct of USA Wrestling, that we were intended to serve the sport more broadly. And so there's always been that spirit of cooperation. And so when we formed the original board, Rich was on the board, and Mike Moyer and Leroy Smith, the heads of those 3 organizations have been on the board, and Bruce Baumgartner's on the board now. And we've actually changed our bylaws where those are permanent seats on the board, no matter who occupies that position. And so, and the bylaws and the mission is to support the growth of wrestling. And we'll talk in a little while here about the Let's Wrestle campaign. But Rich Bender was the one who observed, if the campaign is successful, it benefits every organization, not just our 3 organizations, but everybody out there in wrestling benefits if we grow our numbers of participants.
So when we get, the 3 big players, at least, there are other players that are actively involved in promoting wrestling. But, when you look at these 3 organizations, weaving them together, you've also got, now we've got a group called the Wrestlers in Business Network, which has come under the arm of the NWCA. And it's one of those things we're getting, all big booster clubs in college have business leaders. They have alumni and such. So how have we weaved this all into wrestling with U.S. Wrestling Foundation and in our other groups that are involved?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's something we spent a lot of time talking and thinking about when we first started, because what the world didn't need was another in the alphabet soup of organizations, which was potentially just going to cannibalize what other people were doing. And so one of the things that, we felt very strongly about from the beginning was that we would try to never poach a booster or a single dollar from anybody else. So the mission was to find some new people. And there is a group of people, and you know who many of those names are, who've been around a long time, have been supporters, and support a lot of organizations. And they're involved with us too. But the understanding is, at no time when we talk to them about a program we're doing or a donation, should that ever be money that was designated for someone else, you know? So, as I said, the heads of USA Wrestling, the NWCA, and the Hall of Fame are on there, and then the rest of the board is a group of business leaders. A few of them are, as they say in the movie, the usual suspects. But actually, we've had a lot of success, especially over the last few years, in surfacing some new people who had that same feeling that wrestling made an impact on their lives, and for one reason or another, they never have been involved in the sport. Maybe they went to a college that didn't have wrestling, or they've just been separated. But if they had a way to reconnect, they wanted to do that. And in fact, the Victory Tour dinners, which we'll talk about and Jack will talk about, have been a key venue and focal point for us to do that. So we've got a really robust board. We meet, say, 4 times a year, but our biggest meeting is always at the NCAA tournament because, of course, everybody's there. We always have a long meeting right before the semifinals, and this year's meeting was really robust. Almost everybody on the board was there. A lot of discussion. I mean, there's some really smart, accomplished people on that board who are doing tremendous work and thinking about the strategic issues facing the sport.
As we pull the curtain back, Jack, you serve as the executive director of USWF. Operationally, how does this structure work? How do we weave all these guys in when it comes to your job?
Well, everybody's got time constraints. So we organize ourselves into committees where we have an agenda that we try to get people's input in, beforehand and all throughout the year, and really have a short list of projects that we do so that we can focus on and execute at the highest level and make sure that it works. So that way we're using everybody's time valuably and every dollar valuably.
And with those projects, I look at it as an independent, and I'm sitting there looking at all my independent, stories I got to work on. I'm working on a Gray Simons podcast. I've got the Fargo Almanac. I got my preview guide. I got this, and this. So keeping the project list small prevents, I guess, almost paralysis by analysis, or, lack of time management. So what are, like, for example, on a given project list, say in March, we've got the NCAA championships right after the meetings. What are some of the projects that are like of the utmost importance, and what are some things you're like, all right, now we're past the world team trials. We work on these.
Well, I would organize the challenges for the growth of wrestling into 3 categories: participation, audience, and revenue. And revenue is really about sponsors. Audience is really about getting, people in the seats, selling tickets, maybe expanding to television and a broader audience. But participation is where we're really focusing our efforts to start, because it's the lifeblood of every sport. So that's where the Let's Wrestle campaign came in, and we've really put the most effort into that one and are continuing to.
Yeah, I want to go to that one now, because that's the one where I have directly seen it outside of our wrestling venues, outside of wrestling rooms. So my girls started playing local rec basketball this year. They're 10-6. My wife played basketball growing up. I played a little bit before I decided I was pretty terrible at it, or decided I fell in love with wrestling a little bit more. And I'm walking through the halls at Irondale High School here in New Brighton, and it's the school district my kids will go to. So it was youth night. So there were all the little rec leagues were at the girls' game, and it was a doubleheader. And I walk in, and my oldest daughter, actually both of my daughters really, are geeked out about what was then the upcoming Super Mario Brothers movie, which starred Chris Pratt as the voice of Mario. And they're looking up YouTube videos like, oh, that's Chris Pratt, and they'd see him on like Guardians of the Galaxy. So we're walking through the hallway going into to pay our ticket to get into the game, and what do I see? I see a picture of Chris Pratt, and it says let's wrestle. I didn't notice it first. My oldest daughter Lucy did. She goes, Dad, it's Chris Pratt, and it says wrestling. So I went over and looked. There it was. So there, it proof of concept. I see it, and thing is, Irondale High School is not a wrestling juggernaut. This is not like going to Apple Valley and seeing all these wrestling posters of all their greats. I mean, I don't even know if they had a state qualifier this year. That's the program's not exactly stellar, but there is a Let's Wrestle promo in the hallways of this high school next to the concession stand. So I've got to say, I've seen the other ones, but to me, that's the one that I think, I mean, my 10-year-old daughter picked up on it because of the interests that she had. Dad's into wrestling. She doesn't care. She likes the fact that I'm into hockey more, but that seems to me a brilliant execution of this thing. And so, Jack, the Let's Wrestle campaign, I mean, what went into that, and how do you how do you get people like Chris Pratt involved?
Well, they came from wrestling and they care and they want to give back. And we just wanted to find a way that they could give back in a way that they don't, without asking them to appear somewhere, which is, a time constraint for them. They're very busy schedules. So, a poster makes perfect sense in the hallways where kids can recognize them. The reach for the posters is 12.8 million kids. So it's not always easy to get everyone's attention, but we created 10 posters in the last series. And when kids start to see one after the other and get this sense of adventure and accomplishment and doing something challenging, and we can connect it to a program right in the school, it's a good fit.
Outside of Chris Pratt, who are the targets on this? Oh, sorry, Jeff, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I just wanted to take one little step back and say, first of all, this Let's Wrestle campaign was Jack's idea. He conceived of it and, had to work us for a while. And in 2019, we did a test in 2 states, Pennsylvania and Oregon. And, boys wrestling in particular has been on a slow, water torture, the numbers going down, 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 and a steady trickle for a number of years. And it was just clear to us we needed to do something about that. So, and another big picture factor, when I was growing up, every coach was a teacher in the school. A lot of them were phys ed coaches or anything else, social studies, math, whatever. Now a lot of coaches are adjuncts. They're wrestling people who live nearby, but they're not in the school building all day. They're not there to see that kid in the hallways and grab the kid and say, hey, kid, you should be wrestling, And so the message we got with people is, that they needed some help. And so we got tremendous anecdotal feedback from the coaches from those first 2 states. And, we sent them a kit. So just take a step back. This is a kit they get with the 10 posters in it. And it was Chris Pratt. It was Mark Ruffalo, Tommy Hilfiger. I mean, some very A-list people. And then a few wrestlers. Tamira was in there. Story Musgrave, the astronaut. Arthur Jones, the Super Bowl winning football player. The wrestling people are everywhere. And, the coaches said no one ever, and we gave them some scripts for morning announcements and their interest meeting and, some tools. And the message we got from these coaches is no one ever gave us some tangible help like this before. So we had that feedback, and the next year we were going to look to expand it further. And then what happened in February 2020? A brick wall came down, right? So this was our first year to come back. And in the meantime, the other thing happened was, of course, during COVID, wrestling numbers got clobbered. And so at some meetings, Bruce Baumgartner and Rich and Mike Moyer and Leroy Smith, Bruce in particular was very emphatic about this. Like, this is the moment we need to act decisively to get ourselves back on track, or this could be a permanent hit to the sport. And so this really coalesced the board, and we asked the board members to step up in addition to their normal kind of dues that they give to support this campaign because it is expensive. And we could say numbers, right? We raised $180,000 from our board to, put these materials together, do some research behind it, print and send a kit to 11,493 high schools. Every single high school in America that has a wrestling team got this kit this year. And Jack could talk about the numbers, but that's kind of the backstory of how this came together. It was definitely the input from the wrestling leaders really got our attention of the board members and made them realize that this is why our organization was formed, to take on something mission critical that didn't necessarily fall within the purview of any one organization.
And Jack, when you talk about, Jeff definitely making sure that you get the credit on this being your idea. My question is, identifying which 10 to use initially. And as I look at it, I'm like, okay, there's a very good cross set because wrestling, we say wrestling is for any body, shapes, styles, colors, creases, doesn't matter. We have opportunities for everybody to wrestle. So what went into the selection of, okay, these are the 10 we're going to use here right now. And obviously Chris Pratt being he is one guy I've been trying to chase him down to come on this show for probably about 6 or 7 years. And it's been almost impossible. Andy Hamilton got him when he was with Track Wrestling at a benefit in Los Angeles for, I think, Beat the Streets LA. That's like the only way he's gotten in here. Then Helen does a documentary with him. It's like he's interested. He wrestled at Lake Stevens. I know that. I know his high school coach, and I can't get him on the show. So how do you land guys like Chris Pratt, and then how do you go about selecting the ones you went for this first batch?
Well, really, it's their good graces, wanting to give back to wrestling. I just can't thank them enough. We did have a small connection to Chris when we hosted that event in LA. And so we got a chance to meet him, and he got a chance to see us, and that, hey, look, we're, some people that could possibly help. And then we asked for something that, somebody could say yes to without having to, give a lot of money and be someplace. So that's how that happened. And really everybody that we asked said yes. It was just perfect timing. And everybody wanted to do something to give back to what they would say contributed to their success today. So that part was, I'm not going to say it was easy, but everybody said yes.
But it was a relationship that we cultivated. That gala in LA, actually, I don't know, you might have been talking about a different one, but that gala in LA was our gala, actually. And 6 years set now, 67 years ago, and Chris was at it. So Jack has been cultivating that relationship for a long time. Because even though we're not asking them to be anywhere, give us any money, as you observe, getting someone's attention, just allowing us to use their image. Mark Ruffalo is a high profile actor, right? Allowing us to use their image, that was no small feat. Mm-hmm. And so to go out with our first nationwide campaign with people like Chris Pratt and Ruffalo and Tommy Hilfiger, that was a major statement.
Yeah, the wrestlers are easy. They're part of us. It's the world that are out there. I mean, we've got the Hulk and like Star-Lord now. I mean, we've got we got the Avengers covered. Okay, I think we're good there. But moving on to the superheroes that we have in our sport of wrestling, as we're going to crown our world team coming up to go to Belgrade at Final X. I'm going to go back to the World Team Trials. I think it was in 2009, if I'm not mistaken, because it was Henry Cejudo had just won the gold in Beijing. And I'm pretty sure we were at the World Team Trials in Council Bluffs when the Living the Dream Medal Fund was initially launched. And actually, yes, it was 2009, because I remember doing USA Wrestling videos in Denmark in 2009, talking to athletes about what this would mean for them going into the first cycle of 12. Wasn't retroactive, so Henry was like, man, because he was, I remember him being like, wait, where's my check? Where's my check? Because he had already won it. But the Living the Dream Medal Fund, and it was, we had Thankathons. Al Bevilacqua and I used to host the Thankathon each year at USA Wrestling, where we do skits. Greg Warren came out and did his Wes Wesley character, goes to the Olympic Training Center. Probably still some of his best work ever. With apologies to his latest pitch on peanut butter on his latest stand-up special. But the Living the Dream Medal Fund, this is something that the U.S. Wrestling Foundation is now intimately involved in. And Jeff, I guess the genesis of that to where it is now. A lot has changed, but a lot has stayed the same in regards to the Living the Dream Medal Fund.
Yeah. And I don't know how many people know this history, but there really was a precursor to Live in the Dream Medal Fund, which was the Multiple Medal Fund, which was Stan Desick, was the original person when he was the first national team coach. And he kind of studied it and said, we're having just as much success as getting the first medal. The main difference between the results of us and the Soviets is their best guys are staying for 2 or 3 cycles. The Teddy Echevellis and Urigan and those guys going back to the 70s, and then Beloglazov. Whereas Dan Gable and Wayne Wells would win a gold medal right after college, and then they had to go earn a living.
Mm-hmm.
And so what if we had some money and could induce these guys to stay another cycle? So that eventually morphed into the Live in the Dream Fund. And, we feel that this cycle was the proof positive of the Live in the Dream Fund. That original concept of is if you could offer people enough of incentive to stay for another cycle, that the results would compound on each other. And listen to these numbers, if you look at the quad, right, the 3 world championships and then the Olympics, the London quad, we had 18 medals total, 22 for the Rio Games, and then 44 for the Tokyo Olympic cycle. And look, Adeline, Jordan, the 2 Kyles, Kyle Dake and Kyle Snyder, even though Kyle Snyder's young, he's been at it for a while, Helen, all of these people, they're going into their early 30s. We never had that before, other than Bruce, and Bruce was a heavyweight, which is maybe a little bit different. But we never had people going into their 30s. And so you got people going 3, 4 cycles now, and the results are compounding on each other. So this, to me, was the final hopefully not the final exclamation point, but a real gelling of the whole thing coming together. I just joined as a steward actually for this cycle personally, and we had an amazing email from Helen to the stewards, a long email talking about the impact having that money had for her while she went through her multiple, couple of years here of her health issues, knowing that she had that security in the background and didn't have to make any decisions about her health or future career because of money needs, and what an important element of that. It was quite moving, actually. And, I had just signed up. So I was saying, okay, now I see the impact on people's lives this can have. So that's been the impact of this program. And maybe Jack can talk a little bit about our role in it now, which has become more formal.
Yeah, Jack, fire away.
Sure. Well, we're trying to help market the Live in the Dream Medal Fund. And we conduct these victory tours around the country. And really the concept is to get a personal connection to the athletes. And I'm sure you all know when you meet any of these stars, it's remarkable. They're, fantastic role models. You get to meet the stars in this sport, really different than any other sport. You can get to know them and hang out with them and really, become friends. So it's something different that we've got the Victory Tour. We host 3 to 4 different events around the country. They're relatively small dinners. So it's a personal experience. But we're using those things to, find more stewards and more people that want to be part of the solution to keep our best athletes wrestling longer.
And one thing we've got that's unique this year with Final X having them all under the same roof versus we've had them in different spots is we have a big access point this year for our athletes to be seen. We're seeing Jordan Burroughs, talked to him last week on the teleconference there, or Zoom call, I guess they're calling them now. I don't think they're calling them teleconferences anymore, kind of showing our collective age there. But the fact is he hadn't wrestled in New Jersey since college, and now the Beat the Streets event, which is usually kind of an exclusive thing at Hulu Theater. There wasn't a whole lot of tickets, or it's been on a boat, it's been on the top of a dock, it's been in Vanderbilt Hall, it's been Times Square. So the opportunity for this generation of kids to see these heroes, not just in their their one-off Olympic appearance, like you guys were, like this whole program has talked about, getting away from keeping them wrestling. Helen gets to wrestle multiple times for people. Now we're going to have the ability for even more fans in that large corridor where a lot of wrestling family lives on the East Coast, to see these athletes at once, and the opportunity there for the Living the Dream Medal Fund and the marketing of these athletes and the projects with Let's Wrestle. This is a huge event coming up for the U.S. Wrestling Foundation with all those factors in play. I mean, what's it been like? You talk about those things that you got on the calendar right now. Okay, we're working towards this. This weekend coming up is big. What is in store, and how much of an impact will this weekend have on future efforts for the USWF?
Well, I think this is the culmination of the whole process for American wrestling. I think it's, obviously the event, the competition is the purview of USA Wrestling. I think it's important to note that the host of the event is Beat the Streets, and they're having their annual gala. I listened to Brendan Buckley's podcast a few days ago, and I don't think they're calling it a gala, but it's their fundraiser. So this is their event and their moment. We're happy to participate in it. We may have a little something on the side, but we also have this is one of those things where our board members and stewards, get to attend. It's part of the benefit they have of the contribution they make. And so it's kind of a culmination of everything. I think for us, we key off the results of this, right? The trials and then the world championships themselves. We'll see who our next set of medalists are, and then we'll begin our cycle of victory tour things. We also hand out the big golf check, which is symbolic, but it's still kind of fun. I think if you're one of those people who like to see that $25,000 or $50,000 for the Olympics, potentially $250,000, in print, is meaningful for them. And so,
just like Happy Gilmore, just give me one of those big ones, like that guy.
Yeah, that's right. and for us, we love it when we get some new people. And I always say to Jack, because we're planning, well, who can come to this event or that event, depending on where they live and their schedule. And, there'll be someone who's won their first world medal. And I'll say, oh, we've never met her before, or him. And a lot of the new medals have been women. And, we have them come in, and it's an opportunity for us to get to know them and for them to get to know us and meet the people who are behind it, who are actually doing the direct financial support. So there's just a lot of great that flows out of it. But the cycle begins, in Newark. And I'm excited about it because it's 15 minutes from my house. So I don't have to get on a plane or anything like I usually do. And we will take the ball and run with it once the games are complete.
Now, as we bundle all this together, we've got the Let's Wrestle campaign, the Living the Dream Medal Fund. What are the other initiatives that the USWF usually works on that may not be in the forefront? Jack, I'm going to lean on you on this one because you've been very involved in these I Wrestled in Facebook groups and such, including the one where, I'm involved in two of them. One, I wrestled in Virginia, which I did briefly. I have my USA card. I know how many lights are on the ceiling of my high school wrestling room, but I didn't wrestle in Minnesota, but I live here, but I'm part of that group because it's where I live, be part of the community. So those little social media groups, there's a lot of sharing involved in that, and that's also a lot of people finding as you go, trying to find people that are reconnecting with the sport.
Well, those groups were really an outcome from a challenge from Bruce Baumgartner. He said, hey, look, we have lots of wrestlers, and how do we connect with them after their competition days are over? And Facebook groups, just tending to be a little bit of an older group, an older platform. The people are out there that used to wrestle. We were just looking for some easy way to share some history, share photos, results, things from back in the day that they might care about, and join these groups. And so some of them are taken off really well. Other ones, we need a little bit of work on. But it's just a way for us to find the people that wrestled and to keep them engaged in maybe what's going on today, so that they become fans.
And Jeff, that'll tie into getting new people into the process with the organization as a whole. When you see somebody that's been active on these groups, you're like, hey, wait a minute, we need to tie in. It's not just them posting pictures. Like, wait a minute, we need them in our silent army, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I tried to brand that silent army, and I think it may be time to revisit that. I've always joked around that when I first met my wife, I taught her to recognize a wrestler, you know, and she'd look at you and go, there's one, built like brown guys, So, there's millions of men and now increasingly women who wrestled, and it means something to them. And maybe they didn't have hardly any success at all. But it still was a challenge.
No success at all right here. I got you.
Yeah, but they because they had the direct experience to understand how difficult it was. And so for some of those people to become quite successful, when that opportunity to re-engage is put to them. And, the other thing I would say is, since we are here to serve other organizations and help grow the sport, sometimes when you say our other initiatives, some of these things we're doing do spill off to other people. If we get somebody through one of our events to re-engage with wrestling, and it then reconnects them to their local college or where they wrestled or went to school, and that organization gets that benefit and we never get any direct benefit, we are thrilled with that. And there was one example, without using the name, we had a victory toward event in Lancaster, Pennsylvania a few years ago. They were starting a Beat the Streets program there in Lancaster. And, that's central Pennsylvania, as you well know.
I lived there for 3 years. I know it well.
Yeah, that's wrestling country, right? But it's not where we would traditionally think of doing a big fundraiser, but we wanted to work with Beat the Streets. And so it was a joint project. Turns out Rich Bender told me, and I didn't find out until much later, that somebody who attended that dinner, there was someone that USA Wrestling had been trying to cultivate, and it was there that they first connected with him. It led to a series of discussions that resulted in over a $1 million gift for women's wrestling through USA Wrestling. And Rich said to me, we don't care that it didn't come through you. All we know is you had that event and it catalyzed something significant. So, if you want to use one word to describe our mission, I think catalyst is a good one. We're trying to be a catalyst. It could be things that we are doing directly or things that we are just catalyzing for the sport more broadly. And the Let's Wrestle campaign is our main focus right now. As you observed, we're out there. We've gotten ourselves into the nooks and crannies of America. And, those posters, there's no reason they shouldn't stay up in the hall, not just during wrestling season or wrestling recruiting season, but all year round. I mean, those people on our posters are role models for all kids. And so I don't think we originally thought of that, but we've gotten the report from you and other people too, who've told us these stories about being in these places in northern Michigan and, being in a hallway of a school and seeing our posters. So we know it's made, and we've heard so many coaches. Jack can also say a brief word about the numbers. We've got some indication of the numbers from this year, and they're encouraging.
Yeah, I would be curious. Jack, fire on that.
Oh, we saw unprecedented growth this year. And I would just, first of all, there's lots of people out there with efforts to grow wrestling, and all of them help. And this is really just a tip of the spear, a point of sale opportunity, where if somebody had heard about wrestling, somewhere over the last couple months, and then they go to their school and they see that, their school has a wrestling team. Well, this is the place to find out more and get involved and go to the interest meeting and join the team. Mm-hmm. So the numbers are up historically. It's the highest growth rate in 50 years that wrestling has seen. Boys are up, girls are way up. And again, lots of efforts going into that, but this is just something that it's a focal point that may get the kid going through the school to say, "Oh yeah, I think I'd like to give that a try." So, we're thrilled that we can find some way to help.
Yeah, one thing I want to go back to what Jeff had talked about. This past weekend, I was at the Hall of Fame Honors Weekend, and I got a chance to talk to Kira Pipkins, who was the recipient of the Tricia Saunders Award, and she's from New Jersey. And she talked about, the aspect of seeing wrestlers like her, looking at Tamira Mensah-Stock, the first African-American woman to win an Olympic gold medal in wrestling. And then, Jeff, you're centering back to Beat the Streets Lancaster. I remember having Josh Feldman on the show a couple years ago talk about that. I lived in Lancaster. I lived in the city. My school district, had I stayed there, would have been J.P. McCaskey, which does not have a tremendous wrestling tradition, but it was also one of the very first schools in Pennsylvania to say, hey, we're going to jump on board with sanctioning girls wrestling. And I think they might have been one or two. There's been a lot of movers and shakers there in Lancaster. Pat Tossi with the NWCA for a long time is now working within the county in another school district, basically one bordering one over. And then you talk about the kids that are going to tap into a sport with seeing posters of people that look like them is important. We talk about diversity, but I don't think we understand what that means to a lot of these kids. Is like that Jordan Burroughs looks like me. Tamira Mensah-Stock looks like me. Looking at, even worldwide, Bajrang Punia looks like me. We've got Bruce Bartner. I'd love to look like him. How's that? But, I'd love to have that just gigantic boulder for shoulders. But the identification of an athlete, we can see all these great athletes in other sports and say, yes, I want to be able to have my tongue out and dunk like Michael Jordan. That was what it was like when all the kids in my neighborhood had their tongue out going up for a layup when we were growing up. So soon, we get to that point where the kids are going to be able to see people that are similar to them, like, it's like, I can see it, I can do it. Carl Adams is like, see it, do it in his book and things of that nature. So I like going into Lancaster, city of Lancaster, to getting into places that, it's there. People are there. We just have to find them and identify something that's like, I can do that. So that's one thing I love about it. And Lancaster, again, that school district, McCaskey, again, didn't have a great wrestling tradition. It's had it for a long, long time. City of Lancaster's a great wrestling town. And now it was one of the places where sanctioned PA really blossomed from. So, again, catalyst, Jeff, catalyst. And you don't know what that catalyst is going to be until you try it, right?
I couldn't agree more. And this is a thing for me, not just with the Wrestling Foundation, but in everything I do, which is, put things in motion. You can't predict what's going to happen, but if you don't do anything, you can predict what will happen from that, nothing. And so, listen, with the girls wrestling numbers, obviously they jumped dramatically this year. There's a lot of factors in play there, right? I mean, especially all these states being sanctioned, and we know how many different people are involved in that effort, both, some organizations, Wrestle Like a Girl and others, from top down, and then local grassroots, state by state. So that's catalyzing. But, so then to have something come into the buildings to also help, at the moment this opportunity is opening up for some girls to walk down the halls and see these things and see Tamira Mensah-Stock or whoever else it is, we feel it's just a multiplier effect, right? And so that's what we're trying to do. But I couldn't agree more with those sentiments, Jason. It's an exciting time. I mean, Jack, let's say we're in a golden age. I mean, at the senior level, we are having the most success really we ever have had. And, while we've had a lot of challenges at the high school level and youth level and a lot of different factors there, we feel like, the sun and the moon and the stars are starting to line up for us. And we're trying to, play a role in making sure that we take advantage of that.
As we again head into Final X June 10th here at the Prudential Center in Newark, New Jersey, what are some things folks can do, Jack, that to get involved via social media if they want to become, if they're just stumbling across the organization for the first time from this show, or again, they're picking up a flyer somewhere, they're seeing a Let's Wrestle, how can they get involved and how can they kind of activate themselves into what we're doing with the U.S. Wrestling Foundation?
Well, we did just launch a new component of Let's Wrestle. It's called the Tell Us Your Story effort. we're looking for graduating high school seniors, so class of 23, to get them to submit videos of how wrestling changed their life. Um, we see it in the stars who come back to wrestling, and we're trying to, get the same kind of stories of what's the impact of wrestling to the kids who have just finished their high school career. And so we're given $1,000 for every award. There's 7 different categories, and just hearing from students is a powerful motivator, a testimony for them to say, hey, I think I'd like to give that a shot too. I could use some of that.
And so where do they find that?
It's on our website, uswrestlingfoundation.org/tell us your story. I think there's a dash in between each one of those. I'll maybe try to make that easier. But we'd love to hear from them and, have parents and kids all see what wrestling can do for them, and in some sort of aspirational way. I mean, there's many things that kids want to accomplish. And this is a good stepping stone. It's a good path. It's the way to follow for success later in life.
Jeff, I
The
want to
other
close.
thing
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Jason. The other thing I would mention on the theme of us trying to help other organizations, Wrestlers in Business Network, which Mike Moyer started up and has cultivated and worked at for a number of years, has chapters all over the country. And for someone who's just out there, a professional person, that I think is a really great way to get involved at a local level. Most of those chapters are supporting some local program. There's all these initiatives on mentoring, and Mike's doing a career fair. So I think someone listening to this who's thinking, how do I get involved? Looking in the Wrestlers in Business Network and seeing if there's a local chapter, and if there isn't a local chapter, to consider starting a local chapter. Get some other like-minded wrestling friends, and look at their process and get it going and get a chapter started. And I know some of those chapters have been highly successful and made a big impact, and Mike partners with them on initiatives. And so we aren't all things to all people. We are a certain group of people with a certain mission, and there's lots of the market is segmented in a lot of different ways, and there's ways for people to get involved.
Yeah, and so where I want to go with this one, Jeff, in terms of your role, and Jack, I'll ask you the same question following, or you can just follow along. I guess there's the things we call job satisfaction, so to speak, or the degree of satisfaction one has with what they do. This is not our main job. Wrestling for most of us is not our main job. There are people that are fortunate to do it, but the time you take away for something that you truly have a passion about, and getting involved with the Living the Dream Medal Fund and the U.S. Wrestling Foundation, where's that degree of satisfaction you have with this, Jeff? That's like, this is, yes, it's a way of you giving back, but how do you put a figure on it? How do you put words to it on what this actually makes you feel like each day?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. And when Zeke and Rich first asked me, and I put the ask in quotation marks, that wasn't really saying no to them. That was kind of insane for me. In addition to having started my own business, which was growing, I was already on 3 other nonprofit boards and in a leadership position on 2 of them. My dance card was completely full. I can't believe there's any other nonprofit board situation that I would have said yes to at that time, let alone starting up a foundation from scratch. But like I said, given what wrestling had done for me, I didn't feel there was really any other choice. And just over the years, I think like so many other things, it's the relationships you build. We've really got some tremendously accomplished people on our board. Hans Morris, a former professional colleague of mine, has been an important uh, kind of advisor to us. He's an exceptionally accomplished person. Andy Barth, Jamie Dinan, some of the guys who've been the team leaders. These are fantastic. Greg Hatcher, the Mr. Arkansas. They're tremendous people to learn from. And so, just as an overall experience, I do like the board work and leadership work. And I think the Let's Wrestle campaign has been the culmination of, us trying to figure out that point of leverage and to see the impact that that's having is very, very satisfying to know that we are really making a direct impact on the sport that will have benefits, just percolating throughout the entire ecosystem.
Jack?
Satisfaction comes from solving a problem. And I would relate our problem as we have youth that are under lots of different pressures these days that are different than what we grew up with. We have the highest rates of obesity, anxiety, depression, suicide. And wrestling, while it's not a cure-all, it's a way to work through some of those issues and learn how to overcome those challenges. U.S. military has numbers that say that 77% of recent high school graduates are not eligible for military service. And I'm not necessarily here to make everybody, join the military, but to at least qualify, right? It seems like that's a very big number where our kids need a little bit more discipline and courage and hard work to reach all the rest of their goals in their life. So really just being able to find a way to help kids, support our coaches and what they do for kids, that's immensely satisfying.
June 10th is Final X. Our recipients are trying to get that big Happy Gilmore check at the end, furnished by the Living the Dream Medal Fund. Of course, there's been the Let's Wrestle campaign. All the information about the initiatives at the U.S. Wrestling Foundation, uswrestlingfoundation.org. Again, that Tell Me Your Story, that's one that I'm actually, or Tell Us Your Story, I'm really curious on what that's going to be, because these kids with what's available on their phones and how they can come up with stuff and make it shine, man, I'm just curious on what type of production values are going to be on these things. So I'm looking forward to that. So Jeff, leave you with the last word as we finish up.
Yeah. Just one last thing on that. I know Jack we just launched this really in the last couple of days, and Jack is working and talking with a bunch of people to get the word out through a variety of channels, not just counting on people stumbling on our website. So we're excited about this initiative. And listen, we appreciate the opportunity to come on and tell our story. Jason, you and I have been talking for a while. We just felt this was the moment. Final X coming up. The Let's Wrestle campaign, the dust has settled from the first year. We're working behind the scenes on who some new people are going to be on the posters. The Victory Tour events and the Living the Dream Fund program is just humming right now. And so, listen, I think Jack and I are like-minded. We feel like we're, it's a privilege to serve the sport that's done so much for us.
And with that, again, thanks for the time, guys, and we'll see you down the line. Go Team USA.
Thank you, Jason.
Thanks so much, Jason.